the stage to Joe Macleod. Welcome.
Thanks. Thank you. Thanks very much. Happy birthday. Right, a few years ago, I come from a design background, so I spent half my life like creating new things, going like, wouldn't it be great to do this, or get a new users, we're gonna need more users and new products and stuff. And I had a couple of experiences like 15 years ago where I thought, hey, we're totally missing a whole part of this story, this narrative, and that's the end. So I started digging into it, and it was really interesting. And through my career, through the last 15 odd years, I've been playing around with that in the background. Last couple of years, I got into it a lot more deeply, and I was stunned with how deep it goes, what denial we're in around endings in our consumer experiences. So I want to talk to you about endings. If we look at the consumer life cycle, we can break that down into broadly 3 sections. We got an onboarding section, a usage section, and an offboarding section. And if you map that onto a sort of period of engagement, we can say that we go through different things that attract us to a product or service. So advertising, marketing, packaging. We sort of move forward and start to commit to something. And we get to a point where we're in a period of usage. And we start to get bored as consumers, and as providers we start to look at new things that we can offer consumers, and then we all go back to having a new starting experience. And we overlook the ending. Sometimes those end emotionlessly. Sometimes actually we don't leave it at all and it just lingers on forever. And sometimes we're not allowed to leave at all. So why do we need emotional endings? Well, actually, the consumer life cycle, that narrative is unique in narrative structures because it's the only one where nobody gives a monkeys about the end of it. In all of the other narrative things that we do, whether it's games or books or films, those stories are profound. We're great at telling stories, but we don't care about the endings of consumer experiences. In narrative experiences, they have gravity and meaning. So for example, this is Elizabeth MacArthur. Endings in narratives attempts to preserve the moral and social order which would be threatened by endlessly erring narratives. Richard Newport, solid closure in conventional narratives and history satisfies individual and social desire for moral authority and purposeful interpretation of life and a genuine stability. Now when I think about those things, the moral and social order, do we need this in our consumer society? So many of the aspects of our consumption have all of those in the negative, and we're disrupted by them. So I dug into this. It goes way back, actually. Imagine yourself hundreds of years ago digging up mud in a field. You're cold, you're hungry, your life's horrible. Actually, you're very familiar with this. You have a rich vocabulary around this, and you know it profoundly. And everyone dies around you pretty much very quickly. And you're desperate to get to here, because it's a beautiful contrast. Heaven, in almost all religions, has similar components. It's abundance, it's warm, it's filled up with friendly people, strangely. And you're so desperate to get there, you abide by lots of rules. And one of those rules is how we have funerals. So we have very specific funerals, and there's a rule system around that, and we're profound about getting into heaven and serious about that. But then the plague arrived in 1347, and it decimated a third of Europe within a few years. Such amazing quantities of death everywhere. And death became actually very meaningless. The Catholic religion at the time, which was the dominant religion, very much mismanaged it. It was getting very wealthy because people would leave all their money to the church when they died. And there was a lot of disruption. New religions came onto the scene. We have one of the most dominant ones was the Protestant Revolution with Martin Luther. Now, there's different aspects in the Protestant religion around how we ran society. One of those aspects was we removed abstinence and fasting out of the Protestant religion. All other religions have a component of that. We develop a skill of abstinence or fasting. In the Protestant religion, that was removed. So we've lost that skill of having a day where we go without. Our relationship with jobs, as Max Weber pointed out, that changed as well, where we used to have jobs in the Catholic religion were only valued if you were a pope, a priest, or a nun. But in the Protestant religion, you could work as any job in the eyes of God. Even as an investor, you could put money back into your business and start making more money in the eyes of God, which meant that you actually had a very successful business, which means your employees would then be paid more money, and they would have to start making decisions about, should I work less hours or should I buy more stuff? And thankfully, the Industrial Revolution starts to provide more stuff for us to buy. And medicine and science starts to push back on death. And we start to hide it away in places like hospitals and hospices, where previously we would look after our dying loved ones with a very clear relationship with death. And this left us on earth to consume a heaven-like abundance without any real relationship to endings and death. So where we had rich, valuable endings, and we had a deep vocabulary around that, we've lost that. We don't care about them anymore. We overlook them and we hide them away. We're in denial that we have a consumption ending. So let's look at some modern versions of what the hell am I talking about? Product death. So I go and get a printer cartridge because the printer runs out of ink real quick, doesn't it? And I take the old one out, put the new one in, and I'm holding the old one and I'm thinking, oh, what shall I do with that? I can't put it in the landfill, it's super toxic. How do I recycle it? It must be on the back of the packaging, so I turn over the packaging. No, there's 2 extra marketing messages on there, because I was needing that right then. And then I look into it, and I go online, and I find out I've actually been doing a really good recycling program for years, but I didn't know that in the context of this consumer experience. My consumer story of this had been broken. I have to finish it myself by asking them to send me one of these envelopes myself. I finished it myself. Now, consumer electronics, this is the cliche of consumer electronics packaging. It's the HTC One in mini pack, but all of it has the same sort of stuff. Loads of nonsense all over the pack, apart from the back, which has symbols which no one understands. So I want to see if anyone knows what this symbol, the wheelie bin with a cross through it, means. Does anyone know what that means?
Don't throw it in the bin.
Don't throw it in the bin is what it says to me as a consumer as well. But that's not what it means. It's actually the we directive symbol. It means that any consumer electronic can be taken back to the retailer, and it has to be on products that are sold, distributed, imported. It means you can take it back to that company, and they'll take it off you, and they'll put it into the recycling system and dismantle it appropriately. That's meant to be a consumer-facing symbol. No one knows about it. I've asked this every conference I do. No one's ever told me. That's the We Directive logo, Joe. And even in our digital stuff, we have this obsession with create content, share content, it's shared, it's out there. There's no way to get it back. And I have no control over it, and it has no end. And now I'm feeling exposed and vulnerable. And this is the effects of not having an ending, not having a controlled, meaningful ending that says something. And we end up with things like revenge porn. And this is damaging the products and the services and the digital relationships we have in all our consumer experiences. So let's look at one of those components, because I've got loads of slides I could go through for hours, but I'm sure you don't want to see that. So let's look at digital. Now, digital, we do loads of stuff and we dump it all on the cloud, and stacks and stacks of it every day. And the price of storage has been shooting down. So when we leave these photos online, it's very, very cheap now. I don't even know how to say that number. It's so small. Victor Schoenberg, in his book Delete, says the 3 seconds it takes us to make a decision about should we edit down this, it's way too expensive to even bother with, so I just chuck it on storage. And the manifestation of that means that we start to be hoarders. Now, when do you reckon the first diagnosis of digital hoarding was? Do you reckon that was 10 years ago? 5 years ago? It 2 years ago was the first diagnosis of digital hoarding. I was sort of shocked by that. I think the medical, political, and the whole machine is way behind the curve in terms of what we're doing with the digital industry. I'd just like to leave this one to hang there for a little bit in terms of lingering assets that just are out there. Although I can imagine it's going to be an achievement unlocked in another 10, 20 years. It's like I've killed a rhino by my photo. And even culturally, when we do these, we write the T's and C's and we tick the box where we haven't read it at all, have we? But we write the T's and C's, and the T's and C's are loaded against the consumer and an amicable ending. The ending actually is really biased. If you look into it, it's because you have failed as a consumer to abide by our rules. There isn't an opportunity for amicable endings. So out of the 12 termination references, it's because you've terminated this because you failed as a consumer to honour it. Some of the language in it's horrible and grotesque, although sort of comic and dark. Apple reserves the right to disband a family in accordance with the termination section of this agreement. So I'll put this on a t-shirt and get my kids to wear it on the beach. And so they wander around, and because I've done it in orange at an angle in like a funny, quirky font, everyone's like, oh, apples, and then they're thinking lemons, melons, and then it's an agreement about T's and C's. So a good closure experience. In the time I've been investigating this, I think these are the characteristics we need to aim for when we design closure experiences. It should be consciously connected to the rest of the experience through emotional triggers that are actionable by the user in a timely manner. Now let's look into those in a bit more detail and see what that means. So consciously connected. This is Epsom's paper lab. And it's a pulping station you put in your office, your home office, not your home office, that would be insane, wouldn't it? A legal office, you know, one of those massive offices, probably none of us actually work in. So you go in there, and usually when we do recycling paper, we put it in a recycling bin, it gets picked up on a truck, and it goes off, and it gets pulped, and then it gets reamed, and then it gets cut into bits and repackaged, goes via the stationery company, back into our stationery cupboard at work. That's not a very visible end life cycle. But here, I go up to it, and I'll put the old paper in one end, I have a coffee, and I wait for new paper to come out the other end. What a beautiful metaphor of rebirth. Emotional triggers. Now, has anyone read Marie Kondo's book of tidying? Yes, not enough of you. I very much recommend it. It's great for like Western consumption mindset. So Marie Kondo's a declutterer from Japan. She goes into people's houses that have bought too much stuff, which is pretty much all of us. And she goes into people's houses and she gets you to take out your stuff, put it into piles like shoes, books, coats, and then you pick up every one and you say, does this bring me joy? And then, does it? Probably not, okay. And then you put that in a pile to be disposed of. And then you go to the pile at the end and you pick up every one and you say, thank you, hiking shoes, for giving me grip and allowing me to climb a mountain. I very much appreciate that, but we're going to say goodbye now. And then you dispose of it appropriately. And everyone's like, you're crazy doing that. But we say hello all the time. We have enormously emotional hellos in our consumer experiences, but saying goodbye seems ridiculous to a product. But actually it gives us there's an emotional connection there. But importantly, it gives us respect and it reflects upon what we've gained out of that experience. And I think we don't do enough of that. And it's no wonder that we haven't got a vocabulary when we need to stop talking about oil and start weaning ourselves off it. Actionable. So a while ago, we used to be able to, in the process of buying a plane ticket, we were able to tick a box which said, let's neutralize the carbon out of this. And that was a good thing. It was actionable within that, and it gave us a reflection about the consumption we were just about to do. But in their wisdom, the companies put it under their wing of like social responsibility, hid it away from the consumer. So as a consumer, we don't have another ending for this. It's important. Timely. Oh, wait, I've just gone back, haven't I? That was actionable. Timely. Perfect moment to do that as well, timely. Right, Kaya Cars. Kaya Cars brought in the 7-year warranty. Pretty much all the cars before that were 2-year warranty, and your car door is a good quality car door. But 7-year warranty is an emotional attachment to something, and it says a lot about quality of materials, but it says a lot about a lifespan. Humans find it hard to think to beyond 5 years. That's why you get that cliche question at job interviews and your financial advisor, what are you doing in 5 years? So when you say 7 years to someone about their car, humans are like, what? 7 years? And then we start thinking like, well, that just means death. And then basically what you've been doing, you've been invited to the funeral of your car in a fictional 7 years out. And you're going to drive onto that forecourt with your car, and you'll be very prime for a new resale, a new rebirth. And then Kaya Cars gets the materials back, and the whole system goes on again. And we have a conclusive closure experience. So what can you do about this? So these are some of the things I think you can do. So let's have a quick look into those, very much. Think about it. So hopefully I've given you some level of inspiration about thinking about this. Now, when you talk about this, and I talk about this a lot, pretty much it's really difficult. So you're going to go back and everyone's going to be, but why do we need to do it? And you'll be like, well, it's because of this, that, and this, and that. And then everyone will be like, And you'll be white noised here off everyone. You can also do audits of your own product. So think about like how much effort do you put into the ending of your own product? Is it the legal basics? We got some legal basics, but there's nothing emotional in it. There's nothing which says a profound goodbye. Something that brings reflection. You can map it like a narrative structure in a film or something like that. I also suggest looking into planning it. So if you're doing digital products, planning 5 years out, just a fraction of your product time, 5%, 5 years out, you'll soon start asking questions about death and endings. And also aim for the aftermath. What's that person going to say about you at the end after they've left your product or service? That's the end. However, that's the book, but if you want to get the first chapter for free, you can take a picture of this and go to that URL. And I think Krista's going to send it out later. Thanks very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.